From the Citizens Bank studio, welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show. I want to welcome our listeners from the Jackson metro area and the Mississippi Delta, along with the Mississippi Gulf Coast, as we continue to celebrate all the people who are working so hard in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. You know, one of the beauties of doing a show like this where we can have long form, get to really look behind the headlines and understand the essence of who people are, it really gives us a chance to get to know leaders and others in this state, people from all walks of life, and I love that. I saw a quote the other day from a friend of mine, John Major, who lives in Biloxi. He posted something. It's a Choctaw proverb. You probably have heard it before, but it describes a lot of our guests. And here's what it said. When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries, and you rejoice. I love that. I think that is a beautiful way to think about legacy and giving back to the community and all of that. Listen, I've had the opportunity over the past year to work to get to know Jason White, the Speaker of the state of Mississippi, better, and we're going to be coming to him here in just a second. I've never met him until today. We may have exchanged some notes on social media from time to time, but at the end of the day, I didn't know him. But I feel like I have gotten to know him because I've talked to so many people inside and outside the legislature, and what I've learned about him, I like. And I've jotted down a few notes, and I want to share with you some of what I have learned about Jason White. There's a lot of praise for him about his leadership abilities and what I would refer to as maybe a strategic approach to legislation. You think about things like the state retirement system PERS and the way you have to really look down the road on something like that. It makes you, when you look at things in that way, it makes you know that there's a sense of urgency to act now. When some might say we can kick the ball down the road a little bit further, but very strategically focused on legislative matters. There's a recognition to his dedication to public service. When you go back and look at his life, and we'll do that here shortly, you can see that there's been sort of, from the ground level, a lifelong commitment to improving Mississippi. There's an acknowledgement that he has been involved in some very significant legislation along the way. I mean, just to name a few, the Mississippi Infrastructure Modernization Act, the Mississippi Tax Reform Act, and more recently, the entire effort and debate and success around how we fund the formula for funding education in Mississippi, among others. There's an appreciation for his civic involvement and the way he's been involved in the community. I think that when you do that, and we talk about that here on the show a lot, that when you're engaged at a local level, you get to intermingle with people, understand the issues, and you become more well-rounded as a leader because you were involved in local affairs. There's a respect for his values and his principles, and I think it's demonstrated by the decisions he makes and the actions that he takes as the House Speaker. There's recognition for his awards and accolades. I mean, along the way, Law Enforcement Legislator of the Year and then receiving the Mississippi Rise Award. And then lastly, and I think, this was kind of fully encompassing, a lot of positive feedback on the way he communicates with people. We're going to talk specifically about that here shortly, but the way he collaborates with colleagues, the way he's able to navigate the complexity of the political landscape. I hear of Jason White that he does a great job of compartmentalizing. That's something as a CEO I can really relate to because it means you've got to be able to move from one complex issue to the next. It means you've got to learn. What it says about him is that he's smart and organized and detail-oriented, and I think that's a big deal. I mean, you think about the way he tackled the healthcare challenges in this state. I think the fact that him being from a rural area is important. It gives him perspective. 51% of Mississippians live in rural areas. And the way I see the healthcare issue in Mississippi, incidentally, it's a matter of life and death. I mean, we just got to focus on it. And it's not just about Medicaid expansion. It's about sort of looking at the total system and thinking about how it needs to be re-engineered to meet current healthcare challenges and demands. But he's, I think being from a rural area has given him a really rural perspective on complicated and important issues, and that makes him a better speaker. So, and then I should also point that lastly, he expects a lot from those around him, and that's the way yeah, that's the way good leaders should do. You should raise the bar high and expect the best from people that you're associated with. So without any further ado, I want to welcome my new friend, someone who I look forward to getting to know better, to the Speaker of the House Representatives here in Mississippi, Jason White. How you doing, Jason?
Morning, Ricky. I'm doing great. Good to be with you this morning.
So have you ever been introduced based on impressions?
I don't know. I might have been talked about based on impressions, and I wasn't able to sit and listen to what was being said. So I don't know if I've ever been introduced based on impressions.
Hey, well, what I would say to you is, and I'll say to it on the air what I said to you before we started, I want to congratulate you on hitting the ground running. You came in day one and said, we're going to do things a little different. You're not just going to do it the way it's always been done, because if you do it, if you do things the way they've always been done, you're going to get what you always get. So you got to be willing to kind of move in a new direction. And you established pretty quickly that you were going to do things differently, and that was important to you, wasn't it?
It was. We thought it was time for a fresh look. Certainly nothing wrong with Speaker Gunn's leadership, but that was all I had known, in my 12 years in the legislature, was serving under him as Speaker. So I didn't have any other, roadmaps to go by. And so all of my staff here in the Speaker's office is all fresh and new and new to this entire office and the game. And so that kind of brought a different perspective as well. So we think it was timely.
You live in a very small town, West Mississippi, just your wife's hometown. And as I mentioned to you, I spent a lot of time in the Mississippi Delta, not just hunting there. I just love going there. So I lease some farms there and have a hunting camp there, and it's mostly family and some of my closest friends. But spend time in the Black Hawk area. Love getting a hamburger at Ace's up at the top of the hill. What I say is the best hamburger in the world.
Heartbeat.
I spend time, obviously on a weekly basis past West Mississippi on the way. But when you start to,
my grandfather called it West Station. Everybody locally calls it West Station, but
West Station,
big city of West.
About 250 people, is that right?
Yes, about 250 folks there. I tell people it's where your vote counts more. When I was a young man, my dad still row cropped. We hill farmed few hundred acres, and that was the cotton gin we dealt with, was the cotton gin in West. So we would drive our old cotton trailers, to West to the cotton gin. So that was I didn't know my bride lived right up the street off of Highway 51 at the time when we were driving cotton over there, probably without driver's license. My brother and I both driving pickups hauling several 100 pounds of cotton. But yeah, anyway, fast forward all these years.
Well, hey, listen, my wife is a Bohanovich, and she's half French, half Yugoslavian, Croatian community. Her grandparents came here from Croatia, and she lived on the Point of Biloxi. And when I was kind of coming up at the Sun Herald and an internship program, one of the things I did is actually manage a circulation area for a period of time, which happened to be where her house was located. Her house was literally on one of the routes. Of course, if I'd have known her back in those days, because she's younger than I am, she wouldn't have gotten my attention. She'd have been just a little kid. But it's ironic the way that works out, isn't it? That it
really is. It really is.
It's a small world at the end of the day, isn't it?
It really is. Mississippi for sure.
Well, speaking of Mississippi, I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and as I pointed out, I've had the opportunity to hunt all over this beautiful state. About my show, SuperTalk Outdoors. I'm thrilled to call it the capital of the outdoors. But all the way up on the Mississippi-Tennessee line, killing my first turkey, to all the beautiful time I spent in the Delta, duck hunting and deer hunting, and then of course the time here. But we live in a great state, don't we? I mean, just period. We live in a great state.
In a great state, and I mean, you lead off with one of our greatest assets, and that's our outdoor resources, our wildlife, our natural resources. They are second to none. And as you and I were talking beforehand, as folks come to our state or we go to other states to tell our story, that's one area we don't have to kind of gloss over or worry if they're going, check under the hood. We're proud of those, and certainly, want to see them flourish. And for the most part, we need to just stay out of the way and let it do what it does. And certainly it's one of our greatest assets in Mississippi. And my family, we're big hunters and fishermen, and I grew up doing all of that, and my kids as well. And my son is probably eating up with it more than me now. So I'm kind of proud of that. So we enjoy our time outdoors for sure.
I can say the same thing. My sons are eat up with it big time. But, I feel like a family that spends time in the outdoors together stays together. And there's a lot of truth to that, isn't there?
It really is. It really is. And I certainly some of our best times, we have big dove hunts, Labor Day weekend and the couple of weekends after that. And that kind of kicks it off, for the fall. And, we grew up squirrel hunting, and then that rolls right into deer season and all the ducks and all of that.
Yeah, it's exciting. I love the fact that you're an outdoorsman, so you can appreciate how that is so integrated into the culture of Mississippi. I love that part of this place, and I'm proud to have the opportunity on a weekly basis to talk about it and share the stories of others who've committed their lives to it. Hey, when we come back, we'll talk about growing up in Kosciuszko and going to Mississippi College and all the things that he did to prepare himself to become the Speaker of the House of Mississippi when we continue our conversation with the Speaker of the House, Jason White. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're having a deep sort of, what's going on in the life of Jason White, the Speaker of the House of the House of Representatives here in Mississippi. He's a terrific statewide leader. But this show today is about getting to know him as a person better. And Jason, what I want to do is I want to shift gears a little bit and talk. Let's start from the beginning. I mean, you were born in Kosciuszko. You spent, you spent most of your life there before your adult challenges and what you did to better yourself. But what was it like to grow up in Kosciuszko?
I tell folks it was a typical, Southern idyllic type upbringing. I grew up on a small farm just outside of town, right on the edge of town, actually. But I could get on my bicycle every morning and ride to my grandmother's house, who lived in town. I shudder when I think about kids doing things like that today, but we did it. It was commonplace in the late 70s and early 80s. But that's kind of the world I grew up in. My mother was a public school teacher. She taught there in the Kosciuszko public schools for 35 years. And my dad, he was an engineer. He went to work for Lockheed right out of college, right out of Mississippi State in Huntsville. But eventually he came back home. Him and my mother married there. And he went to work at Holmes Junior College then in Goodman, which is about 20 miles away from Kosciuszko. But that's our community college district, if you will, for home. And so my early years were, he was working at the junior college and my mother taught at school. And so that was the world. I have two older sisters and an older brother. I'm the baby of four. And that was the world I grew up in. We were involved in everything in the community and local sports, and my sisters were in the band and cheerleaders and all that, all the things that make our communities and small towns great. We were in the middle of all of that. Of course, I grew up in the Baptist church. My dad's deacon, my mother taught Sunday school and all that good stuff. So that was kind of the world I grew up in. I got to know all of my grandparents except my mother's dad. He was deceased when I was born, but I got to know my mother's mother and both my dad's parents very well and spent a lot of time with them, especially in the summers and holidays. My mom is from French Camp. My dad is from Kosciuszko, Itala County.
Yeah, French Camp. Know that area well. Hey, so listen, when you graduated from high school, you went to law school at Mississippi College. When did you decide you wanted to be a lawyer? Was that something early on or just, later?
Probably early on. Most of my family had gone to Mississippi State, and I ended up at Mississippi College in undergrad on a baseball scholarship. Was kind of how I ended up there. But it turned out to be, a great blessing and opportunity for me. The folks at Mississippi College were really good to me. And when I was about to graduate from undergrad, the folks at MC found out that I'd applied for law school at Ole Miss, and I got summoned over to Nelson Hall one day, and some of the folks wanted to see me. They said, "What's this about you going to Ole Miss to law school?" And I said, "Well, that's kind of the next step for me." And they said, "We want you at our law school. We're going to make this happen." And so They were very good to me and helped find me a spot over there. So anyway, that's kind of how I ended up at MC Law School. I kind of always knew that I wanted to go to law school. I wish I could tell you why. I admired some of the lawyers in our community there in Kosciuszko. They were kind of the guys that kind of were involved in every aspect of our little town and our county, and looked and appeared to be community leaders and decision makers. And my dad, the lawyers that he used, with his farming and timber business and other things, I knew those guys as well. So I was just kind of drawn to that. I thought that was a little bit fascinating to me. I don't come from a family of lawyers, nobody, or politicians for that matter. So that was kind of new ground, for us. But it obviously has worked out on some level, I guess.
When you look at what you ended up doing, practicing law, being a municipal court judge, being a youth court judge, in some respects, it's kind of providential when you think about how that helped you prepare to be Speaker of the House. I had the opportunity when I was working at the Sun Herald. I did a program called Volunteer and Probation with the youth court system here in Harrison County. I did it for like 7 years. And I got to a point where I would take the more complicated kids and, kind of be a mentor to them and whatever.
Sure.
But Roland Weeks, who was my mentor, the former publisher of the Sun Herald, said that, you got to go flex your muscle in all these different areas. Once you understand that, then go to the next one and then go to the next one. You just don't decide you're going to lead something. You got to kind of work your way up and do it that way. Right. And that's what we did. I think he always said that, to be a great publisher, you have to be a community leader. You got to be willing to get in the trenches and see the challenges that people are facing. And without you knowing that, that's sort of what was happening to you as well, wasn't it?
It was. What's the say? Man plans and God smiles. But yeah, I was a city judge for several little small towns, up and down Highway 51, towns like Goodman and Vaden and Durant. I was on the board of aldermen in West, which was kind of my first foray into politics, and maybe we can talk about that later.
Well, let's go ahead and mention that the mayor was your mother-in-law, so that made it interesting.
That's correct. Yeah, that was a kind of a neat spin in my early political career. And when I first was going to run for the legislature, some of my close friends were like, some had encouraged me, but some were like, Jason, really? I mean, you're a nice guy. That's a pretty rough and tumble place, and the elbows are sharp down there. And I'm like, look, guys, I was able to navigate the town of West Board of Aldermen meetings where my mother-in-law is the mayor. I said, I think I can handle the legislature. So anyway, it was a great experience for me. I also represented and still represent like some rural water associations, some other small towns. I'm the city attorney for Kosciuszko. So all of those things, you don't know it at the time, but you're figuring out the things that impact people's daily lives in a real way, that most people aren't necessarily exposed to. And there are people that's doing the Lord's work, whether they serve on a local water utility board or electricity board or the town board, and dogs and ditches and all the things that you learn about dealing with the closest, smallest local governments. And then you mentioned youth court, but another unique aspect of being a youth court judge, we call them a special master in Chancery Court. You also deal with the commitment phase for our mentally ill and folks that are being committed and that type of thing. So I got a real up close look at our mental health situation in Mississippi, probably over a 10-year period. And certainly we've got ground to make up there. So all of those things kind of expose you to everything from the criminal justice system to local tax structure and you name it. So it was good for me. I just didn't know it at the time.
Well, the city
I didn't make a lot of money. I didn't make a lot of money doing those things, but I certainly gained a wealth of experience.
Well, the city attorney piece, the city attorney for Kosciuszko, really caught my attention. And look, I always knew it was important, but it was after Hurricane Katrina that we came to appreciate what it takes to build a great community, because there's a lot of rebuilding that was going on. So zoning and building codes and infrastructure, the things that are happening that most people don't realize are happening. It ain't sexy, but it decides whether a community is going to reach its potential or not. When you're the city attorney, you get to see all of that. You get to see all these pieces fit together. And that is like priceless education, isn't it?
It really is. And like, for instance, a guy or girl that sits on the board of aldermen, they may have very influential constituents in their little local ward that are on opposite sides of an issue. And they've got to decide, am I going to please constituent A or am I going to please constituent B? They're both very valuable members of our community, but they have a different outlook on whatever this particular issue is we're dealing with. So it makes you certainly know, you got to know what you believe in on the front end, because you get torn real quick. And so it's great exercise for me to see those things play out, in our local communities, and see how folks who came before me, how they navigated those things and did what was best for, our community. And when we were building our staff here in the speaker's office, this past winter, one of the guys that I asked to come on board with us was our long-term mayor, Jimmy Cockcroft, who had retired. He's a past president of MML. He knows mayors all over the state. And so he's been invaluable. He's the old wise head too around here. We say, we needed a little gray hair and wisdom, even though I'm getting plenty more these days. So Jimmy Cockcroft joined our staff, and we immediately had connections in every city in the state from his 24 years as serving as our mayor of Kosciuszko. So that was another good connection. You probably don't see it developing at the time, but it's turned out to be and work great for us here in the Speaker's office.
Hey, listen, I don't know if I remember these numbers correctly, but in West, 250 people are there. I think 50 people voted. You won. You got 40 votes and won the alderman seat, which I always found kind of amusing to hear those numbers. But whether you're dealing at that level or at the state level, what you really do appreciate is that politics is a very local thing. The democratic process. I mean, it's why I hate the degradation of newspapers in America, because the ability for newspapers and all the resources they brought to the table. It's sad that the advertising model has been obliterated, but the reality is that you can provide all this information for people so they can decide where they want to be. And to watch sort of democracy play out on the local levels is a big deal. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that when we get back on the other side. But we're having a deep conversation with the Speaker of the House for the state of Mississippi, Jason White. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're spending quality time today getting to know our Speaker of the House here in Mississippi, Jason White, better. When we went to break, though, we were talking about all this local experience, youth court judge, municipal judge, all these utility boards and governmental entities he was involved in, has a law firm, obviously, in Kosciuszko, the city attorney for Kosciuszko, how that built this great foundation. And what I was saying was that, politics tends to be a very local thing. Democracy plays out on the local level. I just wanted to give him an opportunity to sort of respond to that. So go ahead, Jason.
Sure. Well, I mean, you see it play out in your communities, and certainly we do too. And so it's fascinating. Like, even in our little town, in West, there's still a buzz when we have our local, municipal elections. Now, we all run as independents there. There's no party affiliation or primary. So folks run for mayor, and the top vote getter that gets over 50% is the mayor, and the top 5 vote getters are your 5 aldermen, so to speak. And so, when everybody's vying for those 60 or 80 votes that might be cast in our little municipal election, it is up close and personal. I remember my very first Board of Aldermen meeting after I was elected. My wife's uncle showed up. He got on the agenda and complained about his neighbors barking dogs. And he even brought the old timey flat cassette tape player and played the barking dogs for us one night. So, but hey, to him, it's a real issue, and he was looking for somebody, to address the issue.
I love that, though. I mean, that's democracy, man. That's the way it looks.
It is.
That's the way it looks. There are barking dogs of different descriptions. The higher up you go, the dogs bark a little louder.
The dogs are louder, and they bite a little bit now.
They do. They
certainly, it's all relative for sure.
Hey, we're in August of 2011. You decided to run, and you got into the Mississippi legislature as we discussed, representing Ocala, Carroll, Holmes, and Leake. And I want to go talk about that. But before we do, tell me about your family.
My wife and I met in the 8th grade and dated all through high school and college. We married in 1996. We've been married 28 years now, I guess. We have 3 children. Our oldest, Sarah Burden, graduated from Mississippi State this past May, a few weeks ago. And in biochemistry, she's very smart like her mom, and she will start medical school here in Jackson this summer. So we're excited about her. And I tell people when I'm speaking, especially on healthcare matters, that I'm doing my part, for our doctor shortage in the state of Mississippi. But we're proud of her. She's our oldest. Our middle child is our only son, John. He's a freshman at Southern Miss. He's our football player, and we've come to be a football family following his high school career around and whatnot. So we've enjoyed that. And we've had lots of big fun on Friday nights following his career, and he's been very successful with that. So we've enjoyed that. He's been blessed, with some talent and some grit and fortitude. So we've enjoyed that immensely, and look forward to Hattiesburg.
Incidentally, to the top, my entire family, except for one who went to Auburn, are Southern Miss graduates. And love that university. It's great to see him going there. It's going to be fun to watch that.
Yeah, we're excited about that for sure. And then our baby girl will be a senior this fall. So we still have one at home in high school. She'll be a senior in high school this fall, Carlin. And I tell folks, when Jolene and I are old and gray, if any of my kids are taking care of us or seeing about us, it'll be Carlin. She has the biggest heart and sweetest of our 3 for sure. So we've they all grew up in West, and their grandparents right there, and my parents are in Kosciuszko close by, so they grew up in the typical little small town family setting. Whether they rode their bikes to their grandparents' house or the post office or the little convenience store on Front Street. We still call it Front Street. It's old Highway 51. It runs right through town in West. Kind of a classic little small town upbringing there. We're proud we could raise our kids in that environment for sure.
So, Jason, one thing I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. We could do 2 full 1-hour shows about healthcare in Mississippi, the need to re-engineer it, to redefine the relationship between local clinics and trauma centers, and the role that how we finance it, all those things. That we could have a long conversation about that, but that's not what this show is about. What I really want to do is your wife, Carlin, her experiences in healthcare also sort of helped inform you, didn't it?
Yes. My wife, Jolene, very unusual name. It's a double name for her. She is a nurse practitioner. She went to University Medical Center, and from the time she graduated there with her master's in nursing, she went to work for University Medical Center, who had just acquired rural health clinics in Holmes County, in both Durant, which is 10 miles south of us there in Holmes County, and then a little clinic actually there in downtown West. It was only open 1 day a week. So she would be in Durant 3 days a week and be there in West for a day or a day and a half a week. And so, you get a good cross section of our community. Most of the patients that she saw were Medicaid patients. You get some private pay and some private insurance and some with no ability to pay, but you also get the Medicaid population. And so that was good exposure for us. My kids grew up in those clinics, with Jolene too. So they were exposed to it as well. So we kid Sarah Burden about, she knows what she's getting into. She thinks she wants to do family medicine, but those things, seeing Jolene involved in that delivery of healthcare in a primary care setting probably has helped shape, some of my views or my outlook on how I see our role in healthcare and delivery of healthcare in our state, and things that, I would long for or hope that we could do better or different.
Sorry for getting your wife's name wrong. I didn't mean to do that. Carlin, is that your daughter?
No, you're good. Carlin is our baby girl. And
that's right.
That's dad's middle name. And,
it just kind of registered with me when you said it. That's exciting. You're super engaged in your Baptist church there in West. You're a leader in that church. You've always been about keeping your roots, haven't you?
Well, we just, I kid folks all the time. My wife and I both are probably homebodies. We enjoy just being in West. Now we travel a little bit, but not like so many of my friends and that sort of thing. And certainly when I was in law school, and my classmates were getting jobs in Atlanta or Nashville or Memphis or New Orleans, wherever they were going to. And they're like, "You're really going back home? Y'all are going to live in West?" And, because maybe they had been with me hunting to West and things like that at home in Itala County too. And so they were a little bit puzzled by that, but I don't know. We just appreciate the small town and the community, and everybody knows everybody. My kids know every house on every street, who lives in it, who their kids are and who their parents are. It's just, it's a great way of life. And it's one of the great things still, not only about our community, but Mississippi as a whole. We still have some things that are worth saving and fighting for, from the standpoint of that sense of pride and hometown community that people have. That exists statewide for us. And it's, we're still a great place to work, worship, and raise a family. And it's often talked about in our nation, but there are fewer and fewer places where you can do that as freely as you can in Mississippi.
So, you by the way, that I think what you said about West, and anyone who doesn't understand it probably hasn't been to West, but if you would just go and see it for yourselves, you would appreciate that it represents so many towns like it all across Mississippi, because you remember 51% of Mississippians live in rural areas. And you have to bring that perspective to every decision that you're making, especially when you're dealing with things like healthcare and challenges we're having in the healthcare sector in the state. But as I mentioned, in 2011, you get elected. You go into the House of Representatives. You probably said, "Wow, this is kind of more of the same." I mean, probably the thing that probably shocked you the most is the process can be slow, and locally you can make things happen faster. But what's some of your initial observations?
My initial observations were there were 33 individuals in my freshman class that got elected in the fall of 2011. So we had what we call a big freshman legislative class. That's about a fourth, of our chamber. And the unique thing about our group was we didn't have the grudges. We didn't have, nobody had killed our bill 10 years ago because we weren't there. And so it was kind of a fresh perspective. Of course, we elected the first Republican speaker in 100 years. And so that was all new. But for us, it wasn't necessarily new because it was all we ever knew. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that part wasn't as much of a shock for us as it was for the older ladies and gents who are already here. But it wasn't for us. Ours was more about, as freshmen, trying to figure out our place. And certainly I had kept up with politics. And in those days, we got the Clarion Ledger every day. They always had a big political section, especially on Sundays. And I consumed that stuff. And in West and Kosciuszko, our local news comes from the Jackson metro area. And so, I grew up following those politics and the House and Senate debates and speakers and all that sort of stuff. So that's the world I came into.
Yeah. So what we'll do with the Speaker of the House, Jason White, when we come back on the other side, we'll pick it up from there. But I want to talk specifically about the way he approaches communication, and something he said on SuperTalk a few months ago that I think profoundly describes his approach. And we'll come back to that here in just a second after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're having a deep dive conversation about who is Jason White, the Speaker of the House for the Mississippi House of Representatives. When we went to break, we were just talking about, when you're fresh in the Mississippi legislature, you don't have a lot of memories. You don't remember when someone killed a bill that you felt strongly about, and you're not holding grudges and all those things. But what I've learned about you, Jason, is that you're pretty good about not holding grudges. I mean, you can disagree on this issue, but it's time to move on to the next issue. I want to share a quote that I wrote down from a conversation you had on SuperTalk as you were going in as the speaker. But I think it defines sort of who you are and who you've been probably for your whole career. And here's what you said. And let me say this first. One of the things I observed very significantly after Hurricane Katrina is that before Katrina, we spent too much time at a surface level. We really never understood who the essence of people were. After Katrina, leaders emerged that you would not have expected to emerge, and others that you would have expected to emerge didn't. And what I drew from that is that we need to spend more time understanding who people are that we're intermingling with and communicating with. And you said essentially the same thing. This is what you said. It's hard to be really mad at somebody if you know them. It's easy to hate and not like when you don't know. It's easy to hate and not like when you don't know, but it's hard to be mad at somebody you know. You live by that, don't you?
Well, it just makes things, they actually run smoother. And I we continue to have our Republican caucus meetings, but one of the things I remind my Republican caucus is I want them to know and interact with our Democratic House members and our independents, because, usually when we listen and interact, and certainly it keeps the arguments above board. And even in our state, with all of our racial history and past, if we're not careful now, Republicans, of our 79 Republicans, they're all Caucasian, except we have one African-American Republican. All of the Democrats, all 41 of them, are African-Americans except for one. And I only bring that out to bring this point. With all of our racial past, we got to be real careful, or policy disagreements and arguments and debates will turn into something that lends itself to racial division. And that is not, I want to keep the arguments and the debates strictly around the policy and what's best for our state. And so I've encouraged at every turn our members to interact. And some folks raise an eyebrow at that if they see a group of my House Republican leaders going to lunch or going to dinner with the House Democratic leaders. But it's really good because it keeps dialogue open. And it's true, and you know this from your professional life, when you know somebody, you at least kind of know why they think the way they think. You may not agree with it, but you can say, I can see his side of this, or I can see where she's coming from because of, here's her life experiences, because we've actually had conversation.
Yeah. Empathy, man. It's not, sympathy is when you have feelings for someone. Empathy is when you try to get in their shoes and try to understand where they're coming from. Empathy is a major deal. Humility is extremely important. But, you bring that to the table. And I think what most people don't fully appreciate is how many pieces of legislation passed in the state of Mississippi that enjoyed incredible bipartisan support. You see it all the time, don't you?
You do. And back in the fall when it was rumored that I might have the votes in our Republican caucus to be Speaker, I was having a conversation with some of the Democratic leaders in the House, and they said, would you be willing to come talk to our caucus and just kind of lay out what your vision would be? And I said, yeah, I would. I'd welcome that opportunity. And that probably raised some eyebrows from both sides of the aisle a little bit, but I thought, why not? I hope we're going to be working together, at least on some things. And for all of, the divisiveness you see in DC, we're still not to that level here in state politics and in the state legislature. Mississippians, by and large, are conservative people. Even the Democrats here in Mississippi, it doesn't rise to the level maybe that it does on a national basis. And so there's so many. I tell people the problems that we really need to fix that actually move the needle, that folks worry about when they get out of bed in the morning or when they're riding down the road in the car by themselves, that they think about. Those big ticket items, we've all got a role to play in trying to fix those on both sides of the aisle. And I want to focus our time on those things and not get hung up in the small, petty things for the sake of scoring political points. That's going to be our motive for our time here, however long that is.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when some people, thank God they didn't get elected, run on a platform that says, if you cross the aisle, you're a bad person. I mean, come on. We don't solve problems in this state of Mississippi, and we don't have progress if we don't focus on crossing the aisle and bringing people together. Hey, listen, there's so much more to talk about the next time we get together. I've got a long list that we didn't cover. But look, I got done what I wanted to get done today. to get to know you better, and I look forward to staying in touch with you, my friend.
Thank you, Ricky, for the opportunity to be with you and to reach out to your listeners a little bit. I appreciate your show and enjoy listening, and just know when you're on air, we're listening and seeing what Ricky Matthews has to say and his guests. But thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been the Speaker of the House of the State of Mississippi, Jason White. Listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.